Now, I will say that because they are Europe's representative, top 4 should be a minimum. Not getting top 4 will be a disappointment, regardless of whether they're, young to international experience or not.
Hi everyone, it's Tom again with an MSI interview as we ramp up towards the tournament. As I said, I'm going to be talking to experts from every region, and today I'm going to be talking to Vedius, colorcaster and analyst, musician extraordinaire, everything in the bucket for the LEC team, and we'll be talking about Mad Lions heading into MSI. But before that, Vedius, how have you been, and how have you soaked up everything that has happened in the spring split in the LEC?
I'm all right. It's been good. I think it's really good that we have a new champion. It creates a lot more of an interesting dynamic in Europe, I think. It just makes the region significantly more compelling. And yeah, I think it's going to breed a lot more competition. So I'm excited. Excited for MSI. I think the team can still do well. So yeah, I'm looking forward.
Yeah, good to hear you're looking forward to it. Obviously, MSI didn't take place last year, but we're finally going to be having an MSI champion once again. Before we talk about how Mad Lions Spring Split went, the team obviously underwent some changes. Top lane and jungle got subbed out. Subbed out. They replaced them. Armut as a new top laner and Elyoya as a new jungler. How did you look at these swaps, at these changes heading into the split? Was it something you expected from the team to happen, or did it catch you by surprise?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that they made changes. I wasn't expecting these players specifically. Elyoya I didn't really know much about other than he was young and he was pretty good. But I've heard of a lot of young and pretty good players before, so I, didn't really put much stock into that.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really a huge amount to go off of. And then for Armut, we knew that he was a strong carry topside player. We already saw him play at Worlds. So, I thought they were good pickups. I thought that they should be improvements because I thought Shadow was very one-dimensional in his playstyle. He had a limited champion pool, and I thought Arome just couldn't really compete with many of the top laners that we had in the LEC. So, in my opinion, I think that it was only a net upgrade. And my perception was early on in this, but the Mad was already had a lot of promise. My expectations would be that they were going to be top 4. Where in that top 4 I wasn't sure, but I kind of expected from the very start of the split that they would be top 4. So
yeah, and that's a good segue into what I want to talk about next, because I think many people expected, and quite justifiably, that G2 would probably be first and it would be a fight for second spot. How soon into the season, or at what point did you realize, wow, Mad Lions might actually be a team that can make it all the way to the first place?
Well, I didn't. I thought that I spoke with Cadril at length about Mad Lions being a dark horse. I don't know if we really went into depth about it on broadcast. I definitely know we mentioned it a couple times on broadcast that if someone was going to upset, it would be the Mad Lions. But expectations were very much that Rogue and G2 were just better. A large part of that was individual performance. I felt like that the laning phase of many of the players for Mad Lions during the regular season just wasn't very good. And Elyoya wasn't contributing a huge amount, but it wasn't difficult to see the potential in the team, because a lot of the times when you watch them play, there were a lot of games that they should have won and ended up losing. And there were a lot of situations where they actually showcased quite a diverse list of playstyles, where they were very good in the early game. They had a couple of very difficult to execute comps. They also could draft for scaling. They seemed very flexible, and they also just seemed smart. A lot of their decisions made sense. I agreed with a lot of the things that they were doing. So I could see that they were good. A part of me was if they won a little bit more, it would be easy to sell them. Because I can see it. It was right there. Yeah. But when teams aren't winning, it becomes harder to sell that to an audience, right? But at the same time, I was it's kind of there, but at the same time, there are these individual errors that keep happening, right? Someone dying in the side lane, someone not properly warding a brush, and they were just one of those things where oh, these are rookie mistakes almost, So I'm okay, so that's kind of the gap between Mad Lions and the top teams, right? Where they don't quite have the same strength in laners, and they also don't quite the potential's there, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So the truth is that I never really saw them winning the whole split because I didn't think that they were good enough to do it.
Yeah. So about that spring split performance, what do you think then was maybe going wrong aside from maybe some polishing issues with those wards or something like this, or like small mistakes that you say are rookie mistakes? They ended the spring split, the regular spring split, with 10-8 score, which is almost a 50% win rate, which isn't very high for a
Sure.
top 3 team. And we saw in the split as well, many teams ended 9-9 or were close to that 50% win rate. So what do you think was holding them back? Was that just adjusting to the new players? We've heard from the coaching staff say as well that they try to implement more different play styles. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think Mad progressively got better week on week, which was the thing that kind of slipped under the radar. I think the nature of best of ones sometimes makes it harder to see the rate of progression, but it was evident that there were things that were issues that they were clearly getting better at. Like, I think they lost a lot of games because of dumb mistakes, is the truth. And like, they were just dumb mistakes. Like, I remember their game versus G2 where like Humanoid had Tristana mid and they had won that game. I forget if it was the first or the second game. I think it was the first game of the split even. And then he goes bot lane and he dies under tower trying to dive caps. And then that death was like the turning point. And then he just kept dying after that. And I was like, well, like, this is really dumb. This game was won and you just kind of threw it away. And you saw a lot of that, especially in the first half. I also think Elyoya really struggled to know how to have an impact with his team. So to me, that was just like him trying to find his place and his confidence and space within the team as well. And I also think that Kazi and Kaiser were pretty inconsistent. They were not a super strong 2v2 bot lane. Early on in the split, they were getting a bunch of 2v2 kills. And then later on, they weren't. They were even dying in 2 versus 2. I remember SK's bot lane in particular. They went for an all-in at that level 2 against a Kalista Jarvan.
Yeah,
and then
it was the
I think because of the
comp,
exhaust. Yeah, exactly. And they ended up getting smashed in that 2v2 lane, which then resulted in them losing that game. And just because of that bot lane play. So like, there are a lot of situations where individuals would just make mistakes and there wasn't one individual. It would like vary that would cost them games. And sometimes they got outplayed. Like I remember the second SK game where Tinks made that flash Alistair play over the wall. Right. You could have argued like the whole thing about vision, right? They're like Mad Lions made a vision mistake, which is like fine, depending on your perspective. But I think the truth is that they just kept making these individual errors. Now, what I think changed was the meta started to evolve. When you have a jungle carry meta, the way to play the game is just inherently harder, because what Damwon showed us was that rather than your jungle playing for lane, laners would play for jungle. So they would use their priority to enable the enemy jungle to invade, but also there are a bunch of other things that they would do too. And one of the most important things as a laner is that you have to put your lane in a state that you don't need the jungle to fix it, because every time the jungle comes, they're wasting time. They can't be farming, focusing on themselves, right? And so what Damwon would do is they would have Beryl roam instead, and then he would help the laners fix their lanes. And that's why in the World Finals, Trevor and I coined the phrase "ring the Beryl," right? Because he would then come, fix the lane, and then the jungler Canyon could just focus on what he was doing. And then during the summer split, like, a lot of teams tried to emulate this style, and Rogue even got compliments as to how good they were at doing this, right? Where they would just allow Inspired to do his thing, and because of how consistent all of their laners were, Inspired was very good. And what we've come to see is that Elyoya can be as good as Inspired, but unfortunately the Mad Lions laners were not as strong to be able to enable that type of jungle style.
Right.
So then what shifted was the jungle meta. The jungle meta, still a jungle carry meta, but it became less Nidalee, less Graves, less of these carries, and more about like utility, chem tank, Hecarim, Udyr, and a little bit more ganking, right? So now there's that flexibility where you can play for your jungler, but also the jungler can play for the lanes a little bit more, and there's a little bit more of a balance between the two, which I think made the game a little bit easier for Mad to play. And especially in playoffs, I also think that individually a lot of them played better. I know that a lot of people gave criticism to like the Mad bot lane, but also in those games, Mad were playing a lot through top lane. So the bot lane was struggling a lot. But even then, Hans Sommer really was having a fantastic series. So the bot lane really was getting bodied, even if they didn't get as much support. So it's one of those situations where I think that the shift in meta made the game easier for Mad to play. On top of the fact that they were genuinely making gradual improvements, both in terms of their laning, their understanding of how to work with each other, and identifying their mistakes. Because I think in the final, and like we were not criticizing Mad for randomly dying in parts, right? There wasn't that. I even saw a Reddit comment where like humanoid doesn't die ? You know what I mean? Because like that is that stereotype, right? Like humanoid died,
humanoid
he always
showed up or he woke up today.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I think that was one of the biggest things for Mad, where they rectified some of their really dumb mistakes and they made significantly fewer of them, while also cleaning up the execution, while also playing in a meta that, in my opinion, was just a little easier to play, especially when you're integrating a new jungler into your roster. So like a lot of variables kind of came together, and I don't really want to take anything away from Mad because like what I think that they showcased was I know in the finals and like playoffs, they didn't show a diverse strategy. But I think that when you look at the entire split, they played early game comps, they played hard to play comps, they played easy comps, they played front to back comps. And then when they won the split with is front to back team fight scaling comps, right? So I think that they can play a wide array of styles. They've shown an ability to play a wide array of styles. And while they are better at some than others, the reality is that some are also just easier to play than others. Like a front to back is always going to be easier than a snowball early game comp, right? So yeah, I think that was a large part of why like they got better and how they ended up winning the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think there was a stark contrast between how they performed overall in the regular split, and then in the playoffs they seem to explode. They seem to completely have found their drive. I think you saw against Rogue they were very dominant. Against G2, I mean it was completely different and how they performed. They were explosive. They were confident in their play. So people have said 11.6 is the patch players were played on, which is a different patch. Do you think that this team overall, and also looking at MSI, which is going to be on 11.9, might be a patch-dependent team? Or do you think that given how they have experimented with other compositions, they might very well adapt to whatever's thrown at them?
I mean, they might be. The thing I will say about Mad Lions is I think that they adapted to 11.6 the fastest of all the teams. Like the large part of why they beat Rogue. Like a lot of people are talking about what were Rogue's drafts, right? But like the better question, or like in my opinion, you can also make the argument, look at how good Mad's drafts were. It felt like that they were right on the money. They understood exactly what they needed to play and how to play it. And then they did the same thing against G2. So I think that Mad have showcased, and this isn't also a new thing. Even last year, like the Senna Wukong is an example of something that was consistently getting banned away from them because of how proficient they were at it. And I think that Mad Lions is the type of team that will find new things. They're willing to experiment, and they're pretty good at getting an understanding of what is strong. So I'm not too worried about them picking up the patch. I'm more worried about like individually how they stack up in lane. The reality is that, I mean, I shouldn't be in the sense that like, you know, they beat the best laners in Europe, right? But they didn't beat them in lane. That's not how they won, right?
they beat them in the map.
They won the games, but they didn't beat them in lane, right? Humanoid did have a fantastic series, and I think that Humanoid genuinely got the better of Larson for the most part, which is great to see. And when Armut was in a winning matchup, he could find advantages, and you could sit there and make the argument that Kazi and Kaiser had very little priority played around them, and even when they did, I still feel like Hansama and Trimmy just kind of got the better of them. So like, I understand why there are concerns around their laning. And yeah, I'm also a little concerned about laning against some of the powerhouses that will be going to this tournament. So I think it's fair to have concerns around Mad. I think the thing that plagues them is the perception that exists around them because of Worlds, which in my opinion is unfair because they're a different team to what they were at Worlds. And I also think the conditions at Worlds were very different. I think a thing a lot of people forget is that the 2-week quarantine, I think, impacted a lot of people. And it's one thing to like quarantine from your home, to have to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel room in the same room, not being able to interact with anyone in a country that you don't know, having to eat food that you're not familiar with, and like there are so many things in just your day to day that can just get to you. On top of the fact that you're competing in the most prestigious event that League of Legends has to offer, right?
Yeah, with 4 rookies as well at that time, which is
and that's also the thing. That was their first international tournament, and that was their experience. You know,
they're really throwing in the deep end there. Yeah.
Yeah, and the biggest thing was the meta was completely different to what we had been playing in Europe. It was not a jungle focused meta, and like we all remember Shadow's Evelyn. You know what I mean? Like it's just
that was tough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that there were a lot of things that didn't work in their favor, and while I'm not going to sit there and say that, like, even then, like, yeah, a lot of those players did play poorly, right? And I'm not going to make excuses for them in that they didn't perform when they needed to perform, right? At the end of the day, it is a competition, and everyone at that competition was under the same conditions that they were at, right?
Yeah, it's maybe not an excuse, but it's a reason.
Yeah. Like, I think that part of it ultimately contributes to the performance, and I think that they're getting to play in Europe. They're getting to play with a new roster, a roster that is just objectively better than what it was, and I think that they have potential, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like, they're not a team where I think we've even seen their ceiling yet. And when you get to scrim international teams, you just inherently learn a lot because they approach the game differently. So my expectation now, I will say that because they are Europe's representative, top 4 should be a minimum. Not getting top 4 will be a disappointment, regardless of whether they're, you know, young to international experience or not, because MSI Europe has consistently been top 4. I think that the G2 8 vacation meme was the only time that we didn't, right? So expectations are that they should make that. And I think that, to be fair, many fans are saying that too. You know, I don't think that many believe that, but I will say I've seen some people comment that they're not even going to make it out of play-ins groups, and I'm like, all right, these people are no.
It is what I want to touch on, because in their group, obviously they're facing CBLOL with Pain Gaming. They're facing TCL with Istanbul Wildcats. They also have PSG Talon, who at last Worlds in their group ended above Rogue in the group B, actually. So they're definitely not a team I think people should underestimate, but. I will be inclined to agree. Expectations are that they make it out of groups and then into the knockout bracket and probably into the top 4. But looking at it overall, where do you think this team might find extra advantages or maybe stumbling blocks along the way?
Well, I think that they are a great team fighting team, but the thing is, and the problem with predictions coming into these tournaments is that there's such a massive gap between your playoffs and the tournament that teams change a lot. Like, the amount of growth that a team can make is dramatic. The approach to the game can be completely different. Read on the meta. You know, we talked about it earlier. I have confidence in Mad Lions, but they might just bomb it, right? Like, Fnatic is famous for coming to tournaments in the first week, completely misreading the meta, and then in the short span of a week immediately fix it, and then they come back in the second week, right? And like, this is very classic Fnatic, and that is something that we would always say about that team, which is that, like, they have a poor read on the meta at the very beginning, right? So Mad Lions may completely fumble that, but some other teams may also do the same thing. Like, I think that based on the information that I have, I believe that Mad Lions right now, the biggest concern is individually, how do they stack up to the talent on an international level? Because we know that domestically, a lot of these players were not even in the top 3 conversation. You know, like El Yoya, a lot of people even at the end of the split thought he's the best jungler. If it's not him, it's Inspired, right? Like, these two are top 2. So people are like super confident in the jungle role. Like, nice, we're going to get a young, talented jungler. But Humanoid, people are skeptical of. And I wish they wouldn't be, because 2018 Worlds, when he went with Splice, he had a fantastic tournament there, right? Overall, at least that's what I remember. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I seem to remember he had a really good tournament.
I mean, even in 2019, he played in like against Faker, right? In with Splice. So
Was that 2019 or was
Yeah.
that 20? I thought that was okay. The 2019 is the one I was talking about. Yeah, 2019.
Yeah, he held his own pretty well. I would say pretty impressively.
So from what I remember, Humanoid. I remember seeing at the time. I remember thinking to myself, Humanoid is actually playing very well.
Yeah.
Because I remember they also almost beat FPX. Remember in that group, in that epic tiebreaker, which was super fun. But I kind of like have confidence in Humanoid on the international stage. Personally, I think he's like at that veterancy point right now. And especially when you just look at his individual skill in the finals, like I thought he played extremely well. So I'm confident in him. The bot lane is debatable because they kind of had their ups and downs. I genuinely don't remember their performance at Worlds last year, so I'm not going to comment on it because I don't remember. And we know Armor can play internationally. We know he can because we saw him on Supermassive, right? So yeah, I think that like you can be confident. I think that's it. I just think you should. I think you should be confident. I think you should believe in your European team. I think that you just. I don't think that you can win the split by being bad. I just. I just don't think that's possible. I think it's fine if they don't want to believe that they'll win all of MSI. But you know. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there are the two powerhouses of RNG and Dom and Kia who are obviously heading into it. Probably the favorites for the tournament.
Probably, yeah.
Dom and Kia maybe to stand out as the reigning world champion, but which is probably going to be the biggest.
The perks buff too, baby. There's can't underestimate perks.
Definitely on an international stage as well. The perks and Sven and Mithy are now all reunited on Cloud9. So top 4 is the expectation then. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining me, Vedius, and sharing your perspective on the team heading into MSI. Obviously, as somebody who predominantly covers the LEC, I'm very excited to see.
We'll be fine, guys. We'll be fine.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll absolutely be fine. And before you know, they're hosting the trophy. Who knows? You know, it's it's a wild place, the international stage. I mean, if Team Liquid can make it to the 2019, who obviously played very well, but nobody expected them to make it to a finals.
True.
Yeah, who knows what can happen with Mad Lions. But again, thank you so much for.
Did it.
Yeah.
G2 did it.
Yep.
It was 2016, 2017. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
There's a trend going on there, which has nothing to do with how Mad Lions is going to perform, but for our own beliefs.
Narrative.
Yeah, narrative. Exactly. Yeah. Well, you're a caster after all, right? No. But again,
that's my job. I've got to make you believe. That is my job.
Absolutely. Yeah. But we're all believing from EU side, hopefully. But if not, then hopefully many people who will watch this interview will at least understand the story of Mad Lions heading into MSI. So thank you very much for that, videos. And I look forward to, I'm not sure if you can tell if you're going to be doing stuff with MSI yet, but I guess we'll see. Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your day as well.
Take care. Bye-bye.